Thank you. Well, I'm joined here this morning by the Minister for the North Coast, Rose Jackson, Commissioner Wassing from the New South Wales SES, Jane Golding from the Bureau of Meteorology, and Deputy Commissioner Peter Thurtell, just with the latest update on the series of events affecting southeast Queensland as well as the North Coast and the mid-North Coast of New South Wales. The Bureau of Meteorology will provide an update shortly, but we have seen overnight a delay in terms of when the tropical cyclone is due to cross the coast. This does not mean, however, that there is any reduction in terms of the severity of this future event. In fact, now we're already seeing rainfall at significant levels, and people on the North Coast are already responding to this, and they are living in it at the moment. Our message to the people of the North Coast and the mid-North Coast of New South Wales is, as always, follow the advice of emergency services at all times. Do not be on the roads if you do not need to be. If you are warned to evacuate, follow the orders of the emergency services. Do not drive through floodwaters. Make sure that you use this opportunity of the delay to have a little bit more time to prepare for that possible evacuation over the next 24 hours. We also should make a point of saying a massive thank you to our emergency services and our volunteers on the ground in the Northern Rivers and the North Coast of New South Wales, who are busy in place preparing for and responding to this disaster right as we speak. And after everything that this community has been through in the past few years, it is just an unbelievable turn of events. I can inform people that the Premier of New South Wales has also written to the Prime Minister about disaster recovery grants for, I believe, 15 councils. The Prime Minister has just indicated this morning that he will sign that today, so that will mean that there will be financial support for councils going out the door as soon as possible. I will pass over now to the SES Commissioner to the Bureau of Meteorology to give an update on the weather situation.
Good morning, everyone. What has changed overnight is that the tropical Cyclone Alfred, currently sitting off the Gold Coast, it's slowed down its track. And what that means is a later expected crossing for the eye of this system. So at present, this system is expected to cross late Friday or early Saturday morning. What that means is we still have a period of 3 days of increasing rainfall and wind for New South Wales residents. The peak of the rain and the peak of the wind is expected to be a little bit delayed, closer to when the tropical cyclone crosses the coast, but we are still expecting deteriorating weather more generally through today and tonight. What we've seen so far is we've seen some locations in New South Wales pick up some high rainfall rates already, and the river catchments have started to respond. The Dorrigo area picked up between 150 and 250 mils in the last 24 hours for some locations, up around Mullumbimby as well. Quite a few locations up in that area received over 100 millimetres. So we are seeing the rivers respond. We are expecting more rainfall, and we are expecting heavier rainfall, in particular tonight and through tomorrow and tomorrow night. We are seeing gale force winds along coastal locations of New South Wales. The Amber area has picked up above 50 kilometres an hour. Cape Byron, one of our more exposed sites, is also in the gale force range. And more generally, we can expect those gales to extend further down the coast during today and possibly a bit inland. As the destructive core of the tropical cyclone approaches later tomorrow, we will see a further increase, in particular in that area north of Cape Byron. So that area that's closest to the core of the tropical cyclone. We have seen the seas pick up yesterday, and we are seeing abnormally high tide, so that means that the water levels are higher than you would normally see for the highest tide of the year. So that is something that we're monitoring closely, but particularly around high tide, for the next few nights we can expect some inundation along the coastal strip into areas that would not normally see it, and that's coming from the tides. The waves are powerful. We're expecting significant coastal erosion as well associated with this event. I might leave it there as a summary. Happy to take more questions afterwards, but I guess the key message is the crossing of the eye of this system has delayed, but we are still expecting similar impacts, and we're expecting what that means as well is that we'll have longer for the rain to fall and the wind to do the damage. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. I want to be really clear that a delay in the timing of the crossing of the cyclone across landfall does not mean less impact. We are already seeing the impacts of significant winds and coastal surge. We're already seeing the impacts of damaging winds, and we're already seeing, as we've just heard, the impacts of the rainfall and early river rises. Our key message to the community is twofold. One is prepare your current location or relocate early. We currently have 24 warnings out in terms of prepare to evacuate. Based on the current projections and the current rainfall, we believe later today some of those low-lying communities will be receiving an emergency warning to evacuate. I want to emphasise that we are seeing the impacts of the rainfall and the winds as we speak. The community's been tremendous in terms of their responsiveness and reaction, and they continue to work with the enormous thousands of emergency services personnel from across all agencies, led by the State Emergency Service, coordinated locally and supported from the state in terms of the current activities. It's really important to listen to the hazards, watch the Hazards Near Me app, or access the SES website, where all aspects of information will be available to you, whether it's the live traffic situation and road closures, whether it's power outages. We are seeing power outages currently from the damaging winds. But most importantly, for those people that are in low-lying areas that have experienced flooding before, now's the time to relocate. Watch the changing in the messaging, and for those people living very close to the coastal areas, similar message. If you feel like you're at risk, now's the time to relocate. There are significant numbers of evacuation centres. Again, they are available on the SES website. There is currently 17 evacuation centres that are currently open. More will be open as necessary, depending on community need. And again, we're closely working with local councils and all of the functional support areas with respect to that. But again, my key message is that irrespective of the delay in terms of the crossing, we'll continue to see the effects of the wind and the rainfall, including flash flooding for the local communities in mid-North Coast and in particular the northern rivers and northeast. Thank you.
It's really important that the North Coast community know a few things. The first thing that they need to know is all of the relevant information about live traffic, where they can access sandbags, where the evacuation centres are, the opening hours of those evacuation centres, whether they accept companion animals or not, is all on the SES website. Make sure you familiarise yourself with that website. If you haven't downloaded the Hazards Near Me app, now is the time to do so. If there is any information that the community need on the North Coast that isn't available on the website or the app, they can contact the public information line on 1800 227 228. It's really important that people know the SES website and 1800 227 228 are the trusted sources of information in this rapidly evolving situation. We have put measures in place to ensure that the preparations are as robust as they can be, but this is an unstable weather situation and the circumstances are changing quickly, and that is where the community on the North Coast can access all of the information they need. I do want to reassure the community there are evacuation centres that are open now. The information on where they are, their opening hours and whether they accept companion animals is all available on the website. As the Commissioner has said, we are encouraging people to have relocation plans with family and friends in the first instance. Don't delay having those plans in place. Know where you're going and act now if you're in a low-lying community. If you need an evacuation centre, they are available and more will open as that becomes necessary. I also just want to send this message to the North Coast community. We know that after the years of trauma that they've experienced, the devastating floods going back to 2017, of course 2022, there is a lot of anxiety and distress in the community. Mental health support is available. There will be disaster recovery clinicians and mental health staff on site in evacuation centres. But the statewide phone lines, the mental health line, 1-800-011-511 is available 24/7. You can contact Lifeline, you can contact Beyond Blue, you can contact the Kids Helpline. If you're feeling distressed or anxious, that is a very normal response to this very distressing situation. Please reach out and have a chat to someone and talk through how you're feeling. The New South Wales Government really wants the community on the North Coast to know that we're prepared, that we're standing with you, but it's okay to feel stressed and upset and anxious in these circumstances, and the best thing you can do is make sure that you know you've done everything to prepare, and if you need someone to talk to, pick up the phone and have a chat about how you're feeling.
Thanks, Minister. Any questions?
Commissioner Washington, if I could ask you a question. You mentioned that there's going to be some warnings to go out to evacuate some communities this afternoon. Can you give us an early heads up about what communities that is going to be?
Yes, certainly. So in terms of the current warnings, in terms of the current 24 prepared to evacuate and the likely evacuation requests this afternoon based on those rainfalls are fundamentally around the low-lying areas. So there's a range of different catchments, but again, the key piece that I think for the key aspect in terms of the messages to utilise those websites, we're talking about communities that are in low-lying areas is the key focus area.
Are those low-lying areas in the mid-north coast as well on the Coffs Coast, or just the northern rivers?
The low-lying areas are primarily in the northern rivers area. That's where we're seeing most of the rainfall currently and some of the river rises. But again, that doesn't exclude people in the mid-north coast.
Sorry, Miles. Is there a chance that the cyclone is going to, now that it's slowed down and it's over water for a longer period of time, is it going to intensify slightly before it hits the coast, or is it just going to stay at the same intensity as it comes in?
I'll ask the Bureau to respond to that.
No worries.
Commissioner, sorry.
Our expectation is it will maintain its current category until crossing.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just talk a little bit about pre-deployment? So is search and rescue, are all operations up there at the moment? How's that working out?
Yes, so we have thousands of personnel from the State Emergency Service, from all of the emergency service organisations and from all the support functional areas. There has been significant pre-deployment into the northern rivers and the mid-north coast area. And we continue to plan for that right through the weekend and into next week in terms of subsequent. We've got a second wave, if you will, in terms of surge support. Some of that includes everything from aircraft to expertise in terms of incident management, significant communications equipment and personnel associated with that, but most importantly the frontline volunteers and staff that are in there in terms of in-water and on-water flood rescue technicians. We don't want to use those capabilities. That's why their key message is about relocate early, don't go through floodwaters, but it's an essential part of our capacity to respond. Most of those personnel currently are doing door knocks with local community members. They've been through the Lismore CBD. They continue to engage and do door knocks and talk with the local communities that are in the high-risk locations to help where people need help, or to make sure that they have the most current information face-to-face, in addition to the online information that is available to them. We have further surge support available to us nationally as well. We're working very closely with all of our other jurisdictions as well as the Australian Defence
Are there
Force.
still crews coming from down south or in reserve, or is kind of everyone already up there?
We're really fortunate in New South Wales. We've got significant resources, and we've been able to pre-deploy those resources. We're doing this in a shared capability, a shared ability in terms of both our planning and our resourcing with Queensland. So we've actually been engaged very closely with Queensland, continue to be, so we can share resources where we need to. But in addition to that, we have significant capability and capacity also from a Commonwealth perspective.
What about in terms of, sorry Miles, what about in terms of specifically the SES boats? I'm sure I remember in 2022 in Lismore there was I think only a couple of boats available to the residents and they had to resort to climbing on the roofs. So have you pre-prepared for that?
Absolutely. The State Emergency Service has got significant boats in terms of in-water and on-water flood rescue boats. That's supported by police, it's supported by fire rescue, and it's supported by rural fire. It's supported by the ambulance. So we have a significant SES capability and we have a significant collective capability, all trained to the same standard, interoperable and integrated equipment and communication systems, and all of that is being pre-deployed.
The SES supposedly ran out of sandbags yesterday, and residents said they lost valuable prep time. Why did the SES not anticipate there would be such high demand for these items? And perhaps one of the ministers can also respond to this as well.
We have had some locations yesterday that ran out of sandbags. Again, that's been restocked, and we continue to work with those local communities. We've got 400,000 sandbags available. They continue to be restocked into those locations. We appreciate the responsiveness of the local community, and we'll continue to work with those local communities to make sure that that is available to them.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, as the Commissioner said, there's hundreds of thousands of sandbags arriving. We would just urge the community to keep an eye on the SES website as the central holder of all information in terms of where to collect sandbags, where you can actually prepare yourselves. Even though the severity of this has not decreased in any way, there is a window of opportunity to get prepared. We know there is a massive demand for sandbags as people act to get themselves prepared or to relocate. So keep an eye on the SES website for where you can collect those sandbags.
And just on that, Minister, is there, and perhaps the Commission can speak to this instead, I'm not sure, but is there a possibility this could happen again, that we run out of sandbags? Because while we do have more time, it sounds already like the weather's getting quite severe.
Yeah, look, obviously we'll be pulling out all the stops to make sure there are enough sandbags for people to get prepared. The SES is well equipped to ensure that we are prepared to support the people of the Northern Rivers and the Mid-North Coast to prepare for this in this window of opportunity as we wait for this cyclone to cross the coast.
Jane, can I ask you a question? The timing of the crossing now that it's been delayed overnight Friday into Saturday morning, does it line up more with the expected high tide that's coming through in the early hours of Saturday morning, and does it make it more dangerous for a storm surge on the immediate coastline?
I'd say it's a similar risk.
Right.
We're expecting high tides the next few nights. If the system crosses at around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be at the time of the high tides, and at the moment, it's still a couple of days out. We can't finesse the exact timing. But so the message, I'd say it's the same risk. Yep, high tides the next few nights, coastal erosion, and as that system crosses the coast, if it's on high tide, a very dangerous storm tide on top of it.
Can you just tell us the difference in danger along the immediate coast if a cyclone eye, particularly for areas south of the eye, if it crosses lining up with a low tide compared to a high tide?
Yeah, so I think the high tide in some places is around about 2 metres at the moment. With the abnormally high tides at the moment, we expect that in itself is creating another half a metre on top of it. So that means your water level's up around 2.5 metres at high tide. If it crosses at low tide, the water level might be 0.5, 0.8 metres, depending on where you are. Everywhere has different low tide, high tide numbers. So the sea level would be considerably lower than if it crossed at high tide, if that makes sense.
Minister Jackson, just on the evacuation centres that you spoke to, you mentioned that if we need to scale up, we will see that. What is the capacity and what centres are you already seeing kind of become busier? I suppose that's really helpful information for people who are looking at these sites and whether or not to go now or later.
Yeah, so we already have a number of people at the Lismore site and at the Evans Head site in particular. There's small numbers at some of the other locations. Most of those individuals are vulnerable people, people who were already experiencing homelessness, perhaps residents of the pod villages. We know that on the north coast of New South Wales there is a significant homeless population or people in unstable housing. We've proactively reached out to those people through our partner organisations, through the SES, through the Reconstruction Authority, and invited them to come and stay at evacuation centres, and pleasingly a number have. So the Lismore and Evans Head facilities have already seen a number of people. There are another 7 locations, primarily around the mid-north coast, the major centres there that have not opened evacuation centres yet, but we do have sites identified, and depending on how the storm moves and its impact, we are ready to open those mid-north coast centres if they're needed.
Are we seeing?
Would you say when you open these sites, if needed, what's the threshold and those sites on the mid-north coast? I mean, obviously things can change. I know the cyclones predicted to cross later and all that matter.
Yeah, we open the sites based on advice from the SES. You know, it's very much an operational matter in terms of their assessment of where the impact is likely to be. So perhaps the Commissioner might mention some of the matrix that they use, but it's advice of the SES that we use to identify the types of communities where an evacuation centre is going to be needed.
Thank you, Minister. In addition to the Bureau of Meteorology's information, we have flood intelligence officers that effectively, if you like, number crunch that into what does it actually mean. That's a combination of flood gauges, it's a combination of flood intelligence from the Bureau, it's a combination of literally watching the river rises and the like. So there's a whole range of different information and intelligence that brings forward in terms of that informs our warnings and informs at the same time aspects of what support needs. So if we're warning and expecting communities to relocate or evacuate, then it's very important they have somewhere to go. As we've heard, our preference is to relocate early and do that through family and friends, but certainly where necessary, the evacuation centres are informed on that sort of back-end intelligence, the bits that people don't see.
Are we seeing any early figures of the numbers of people in the evacuation centres since they've opened?
We currently have approximately 10,000 homes in the areas of the 24 prepare to evacuate areas. That would equate to approximately potentially 20,000 people. But again, acknowledging that a number of people have already relocated, and they are very broad figures, but we're talking significant numbers. But again, our planning in terms of evacuation centres, the community responsiveness around that in terms of support from other communities, family and friends has been tremendous, and that's what we really like to see, if you like, and again, we're very conscious that this is a community or communities from mid-north coast through to northern rivers that unfortunately have experienced significant flooding. In this case, there is significant coastal impacts as well as significant wind and the potential for the flooding that we're starting to see.
So just to clarify, are they the number that you're expecting? At its height in those evacuations?
Those numbers are the worst case scenario numbers, and we plan for you've heard this before from me and from others I'm sure, is we're planning for the worst and we're hoping for the best. And so those figures are based on worst case scenarios in terms of flooding impacts. But again, the key message for the community is continue to do what you are doing in terms of listening, watching and engaging with the local emergency services and the information. Be engaged in terms of your local situation, whether it be on the coast, but particularly for those that are in flood-prone areas, and be prepared or relocate now.
I might just add just briefly, Commissioner, just to let you know that there are 198 people who have registered with an evacuation centre already. They opened at 4 p.m. yesterday. So some of those people are in the centres and using the facilities now. Others have just come and registered that if an evacuation order is in place, that they will attend the centre. So that's the current status.
And Minister of the North Coast, are you going to be travelling there later today?
Yeah, look, I'm going to get up there as soon as I can. Obviously, the Premier and Minister Dibb are there now leading the emergency response. They'll be standing up later this morning. So as soon as it's safe for others to come, of course, I'll be making sure that I get up there.
I take that as perhaps not this weekend then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of needing to make sure that it's actually safe. Obviously, the airports are closed, and we need to focus on getting first responders and emergency service personnel into the community. So when I can get up there, I will. I actually also have budget estimates tomorrow. Of course, brilliant timing. So I'll have to work through with the opposition about whether I can get out of that. But anyway, we'll just wait and see.
Deputy Premier, can I ask you about the emergency grants?
Yes.
Obviously, with the Prime Minister signing off on them, when can residents expect them?
Yeah, well, look, the Premier will be standing up later this morning with Minister Dibb in Lismore. The Prime Minister only just announced that he would sign that, so our understanding is that local councils will have those disaster recovery grants as soon as possible. As soon as we have that timeline, we'll communicate that with the community and with local councils who will be at the forefront of recovery, obviously. That was a priority of the government to make sure that request to the Prime Minister was made, and we're grateful to the Prime Minister for saying he'll sign that today.
There have obviously been previous emergency incidents where those grants have come in quite late.
Yes.
So are we expecting anything like those kinds of timeframes?
The people of New South Wales, and particularly the people of the North Coast, the Northern Rivers, can be assured that the New South Wales Government will be pushing for that to be released as soon as possible, because people need that as soon as possible, especially considering the communities that have been absolutely through the ringer in recent years on the Northern Rivers.